On Tuesday this week, President Bola Tinubu approved the disengagement of longtime Group Managing Director of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation Limited, Malamele Kyari, Chairman of Board Pius Akinyelure, as well as the dissolution of the entire NNPCL board. In the place of Mele Kyari, the president appointed former Managing Director of Shell, Bayo Ojulari, as the new Group CEO of NNPC Limited. We are now being joined by oil and gas expert Olabode Sowunmi to discuss how the State Oil Corporation fared under Mele Kyari and what to expect from the new kids on the block. Good day. It's great to have you join us on Newsday. Now, I want us to begin by just analyzing Mr. Bayo's credentials as it pertains to what we've heard so far. People saying that this is a strategic move from just bringing in people who are in the system, primarily with the political sides, to bringing in technocrats, people who are in the blood of the oil and gas industry as it pertains to how it is handled. Would you just shed some more light on this?
Okay, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Primarily and fundamentally, one thing is good that we lay as foundation. They are all technocrats. In other words, they've been involved in the core technical aspects of the industry. However, what Ojulari brings into the NNPC is a fresh pair of eyes. And that is a normal thing in terms of strategy. In other words, if you've been doing something in a particular way, sometimes you just want to change the method and the ways you do things. Perhaps you get different results. So Bayo Ojulari is expected to come in with strong corporate governance. In other words, they're going to change. There's going to be more respect for rule of law, corporate issues, the way things should be done with respect to international standards. Those are the kind of things that he expected that he has been used to, that he will bring in. And then he can be able to pivot and then strategically position the NNPC to compete, not just within itself or with Nigerian companies, but with international companies. Those are the kind of strengths that Ojulari, from the obvious, is expected to bring into NNPC at the moment.
All right, like your emphasis on a fresh pair of eyes, but they're also saying that if you want the future to be different, you need to study the past. So my question is, what tangible metric shows NNPC's performance improvement or decline under Kyari's leadership?
Okay, so I see people talking about the performance of these people, but albeit in very, very wrong framework. So there's always a set of reference. The reason why you employ a HR manager is totally different from the reason why you employ an accountant, which is totally different from the reason why you employ a janitor. And each person is successful to the extent that they meet their key performance indicators. That's their KPIs. We cannot be talking about the performance or otherwise of a CEO without understanding the KPIs to which they were brought in. It is my understanding that one of the things that they were brought in to do was to stabilize the ship after the PIA and then ensure divestment, both of which has been done. So we can't just create KPIs for them. It has to be the people who employed them, which in this case, the presidency and the ministry or whatever, who are able to now say the CEO within reason or within this is able to do certain things. Without that, you cannot call somebody a failure. We need to also understand that these are people who have done 30 years plus in the industry and who has risen to the peak of their career. So you cannot call somebody who has risen to the peak of their career a failure by any stretch of imagination. But it is always good to to hold on to the positives. Look at where the NNPC was 3 years ago, and look at where they are now, and then we can now look at the future in terms of where we want to get to. And that would be my own submission on that.
All right, let's talk about the fact that NNPC's commercialization against its operational transparency. How would you say, during Mele Kyari's tenure, how has that impacted the Limited as a whole? And this comparison that we've often seen, especially in the mainstream with people comparing both of their credentials, what do you think is necessitating this, and is it even necessary?
Sorry, can you repeat that question? I didn't get the early part.
Yeah, so I talked about
experience.
NNPCs. Okay, with regards to the credentials, I talked about how the mainstream media has taken to comparing and contrasting, that is between Mele Kyari and Bayo Julari. And I'm saying that this comparison, what do you think is necessitating it? And do you think it is even important at this time?
I think it is ignorance that is causing that. Because, I mean, even if you watch football, I mean, a player who has spent all his career in one club versus another one who has spent his career 2-3 years at a different club does not really mean anything. People are employed for certain reasons. And I'm saying this from a position of knowledge. I've worked with 4 multinationals. I've worked with KPMG. I've worked with Ericsson. I've worked with Harris Corporation, their U.S. defense contractors. And in each of all these places, anytime the top management is changing a CEO, there is always a reason. It is the purpose. It is the target. It is the KPIs for which those people are being employed that determines who is going to be employed. You may even have a PhD. In fact, you may have a Nobel Prize, but you may not be a right fit for that position. So that idea of making all those kind of comparisons that the mainstream media is doing, first of all, the people who are making those comparisons are not knowledgeable enough about the industry. They are not necessarily knowledgeable about HR practices, and they are not doing things that is going to move the industry in the right direction. So people should be more constructive oriented and more constructive minded in these fundamentals. That's what I think, and they should stick to what they know. I think that's what I would say on that.
Okay, in terms of sticking to what we know, what are some of the strategic errors in Nigeria's oil sector management that remain unaddressed by the leadership transition?
When you say strategic errors, I'm not sure there's a difference between a move that is in and of itself erroneous, and there's a difference between a move that has differences of opinion. There are different opinions on how certain decisions could have been made. Those are judgment calls. And different people will pass different judgments based on who they are and based on their own ideas of how the things should move forward. That's not an error. In fact, that is what makes us rich as a society. So if a new set of people come into the stream, and this new set of people decide for whatever reasons, to go in a particular direction, you can't call that a correct move. You can't even call the previous move an error. It's just a different way of approaching things. So this idea that there must be a villain and a victor and a hero to what are normal, basic managerial decisions are not correct. So in terms of what has happened within the NNPC, let's look at it back. The NNPCL changed as a result of the PIA. The NNPC itself as an organization went through an internal culture shock because it had to get itself into a position as a player, and it was shed off its excesses of power as a regulator. 2 new regulators came into place, which they themselves needed to interrelate with, the NMDPRA and the NUPRC. Those are the things that happen. So I'm finding it difficult to see what you can call errors in terms of stabilizing and moving forward a company that is going through a culture change at this time.
All right. So under Bayo Julari, what can we expect to see with regards to NNPCL's relations with its current partners, for instance, the IOCs and other partners within the country that they currently have? What can we expect to see in terms of improvements of those relationships, especially some of the ones that we've seen have been very fragile lately?
Okay, so if you look at his past, where it's coming from, we're expecting to see strength for him to bring changes into the corporate governance system within the NNPC, because that's what he's used to. And even the CFO for NNPC is also from the private sector. He left, I think it was either Chevron or ExxonMobil. So we're expecting to see greater clarity, greater transparency in the reportage of the things that are happening within NNPCL. However, those are not the key things that will determine what he will do. It is the targets that the president has set for him. From what has been reported, one of his targets is to increase production to 3 million barrels per day. That as from where we are now, it's a huge ask. So aside from whatever people would think in terms of maybe the activities happening in downstream, that's not even to be his primary responsibility. His primary thinking, based on the people that have given him the job, is to see how there will be an upheaval in terms of the operations in the upstream sector, such that they're able to produce 3 million barrels per day. Those are the areas, strategies for that, interactions with people in those communities, effectiveness in terms of tools and management of people. Those are the kind of things we expect to see from Mr. Ojulari's regime.
Oh, just quickly, you mentioned that the target that's been set is a bit of a huge ask. Do you think that all the KPIs that have been outlined are robust? Do they cover all the areas that you expect as an expert?
Okay, so first of all, I mean, I want to believe he had some discussions, an interview with his employers before taking on the job. I mean, people don't just take such jobs. So it is in those discussions that they will have discussed some things which we may not be privy to. Mm-hmm. They will have discussed some things, and in those things that they've discussed, they will be talking about whether those things are achievable or not. So that's where we can actually, unless we are privy to those discussions, we cannot really analyze what is possible or not. But having said that, we need to remember that as at about 8-10 years ago, during the Jonathan regime, we were doing 2.5 million barrels per day. So the infrastructure that will produce 2.5 million barrels per day already exists. It's not like he's going to invent something. So what he needs to do is to find out why those infrastructure is not performing at optimum and put in the right things to it to ensure that the 2.5 million barrels is achieved first, and then they now make some increment and set the ball for about the 3 million barrels per day. Of course, the part that will get the attention, which is the political part, is the Dangote and the downstream issues. But I'm sure they will sort themselves out on that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we're quite sure about that. Mr. Olabode Sowunmi, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us on Newsday.